Welcome to Wendy Yuan Unfiltered. My name is Charlie Smith and my co-host is Wendy Yuan. BC Conservative Party members will vote online for a new leader from May 23rd to 29th. The winner will be announced at the convention on May 30th, and one of those candidates is Yuri Fulmer. And thanks for coming to the studio, Yuri.
Thanks for having me.
Now, can you start with a 30-second statement introducing yourself to our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. First and foremost, I'm a father. I've got two beautiful children, a 6-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter, who are the absolute loves of my life. I'm Canadian by birth. I grew up first part of my life in Australia. Came here for 3 weeks 35 years ago. Been in business for myself in BC my entire life, so signed the front side of a paycheck. I've been a community volunteer for the last 25 years of my life and running for leader today.
This is a father, a business leader, a university chancellor, and the next premier of British Columbia. This is Yuri Fulmer. He was born a Canadian citizen, but he only arrived in Canada from Australia in 1991. He came to BC for a 3-week trip 3 decades ago and fell in love with this province and stayed for good. His mother was a school teacher, his dad served in the military, and they taught him his values and instilled in him a drive to better himself and those around him. His very first job was here in BC. It was clearing tables and running the drive-thru at an A&W. That's where he learned what it means to show up, to work hard, and earn your way. Those values, the entrepreneurial drive, eventually led to owning and operating dozens of A&W restaurants across Western Canada, and building other businesses too. He's met payroll, he's dealt with red tape, he knows about the pressure of rising costs, and he's seen how government decisions hit real families and employers. But building isn't just business, it's making life better for those around you. Whether that's your family, your neighbors, or society in general, that matters too. Yuri was proud to serve as the Global Chair of United Way Worldwide, the Chancellor of Capilano University, and the CEO of Fulmer & Co., which supports small and medium-sized businesses. He's also taken on big public service roles, including chairing BC Ferries, where disciplined governance and financial oversight aren't slogans, they're the job. And he also put his name on a ballot and ran as the BC Conservative candidate in the last election, when success was far from a sure thing for our party. Yuri's not a career politician, he's a builder. He's running to be the next premier of this province because he believes we can build a better BC. BC needs real leadership that focuses on results, a stronger economy, safer communities, property rights enshrined into law, and public services that actually deliver. If you share the vision for the future of this province, join our campaign to make Yuri the leader of the Conservative Party of British Columbia and help build that better BC for all who call this beautiful province home.
Well, that's great. Wendy and I will ask 11 questions altogether, and we would like you to keep each of your responses to about 90 seconds so that we can get through everything. Then we will offer you an opportunity to deliver a 30-second closing statement. So Wendy, I'll invite you to ask the first question.
Sure, thank you, Charlie. I wanted to start by asking about your family background. How was the way you were raised shaped your values, and how did this influence the person you are today?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I was raised in Australia, and the lifestyle for young people is very different in Australia, right? You really are raised in the community. So, when I was a young boy, you'd go out on the street and you'd play on the street, and somebody's mum or dad would make you lunch, and somebody's mum or dad watched out for you. And, at the end of the day, somebody's dad would stand at the top of the street and yell dinner time, and we'd all run home.
Isn't that awesome?
And so we'd raise each other and be part of each other, and you listen to other adults and you listen to your friends' parents. And, I grew up in a world where you called your friends' parents Mr. or Mrs. Mm-hmm. I went to a private school, I went to a Christian school, so raised with Christian values. And, my grandmother was very deeply Christian until her dying day. So always raised with that. My mother started her life as a school teacher, became a university professor later in her life. My father was an economist by training. He started in the military in Canada. He is Canadian, was in the Air Force on Vancouver Island. So, it was a combination of sort of being raised by two very hardworking parents. Mm-hmm. My mother's got a PhD. My father has 3 degrees. My father was an entrepreneur for a lot of his life as well. So, I think I had the best of every world. I think I was very blessed. I'm an only child. Yeah. So, selfishly, I got all the attention, right? As an only child does. So I never really realized there were other people, other kids in the world. But I feel blessed for my upbringing, and I think it creates the man that you become later in life. You don't always realize at the time, but it is who you become.
Now, if you were sworn in as Premier tomorrow, what are 3 actions you would take early in your term to signal a change in direction for the province?
That we will be the government of all British Columbians. So divisiveness has to be over, right? We'll be the government of people who voted for us as well as the government of people who didn't vote for us. And we're going to bring British Columbians together to solve problems that face all of us. So we're going to treat all British Columbians with the respect they deserve. We're going to make sure all British Columbians have the social services that they need. We're going to make sure that the economy works for all British Columbians. And we're going to try and get prosperous together. And we have everything we need in this amazing province to be incredibly prosperous. Right? We should be in the land of no taxes at all. We've got so much prosperity. But instead, we're the third most taxed jurisdiction in North America. Instead, we've got a healthcare system that's in absolute ruins. It needs to be fixed. And we've got a law and order that has been abandoned on our streets. British Columbians are fearful on their streets. And what I can't have as Premier is the citizens of British Columbia not feeling safe. Right? So we've got to restore safety for people. We've got to restore prosperity for people. And I think first and foremost, and this is the thing I hear in every room I go to in British Columbia, is people are worried about their private property rights. So we've got to repeal DRIPA. We've got to make sure British Columbians know that their home, that's probably their biggest asset, the thing we all worked hardest for in our lives, we've got to make sure British Columbians know they own it.
Now, that brings us to the next question. So as you know, Yuri, British Columbians worry about the status of our finances. And BC credit rating has been downgraded 5 times in 4 years. And the province is facing a $12 billion deficit. So if and when elected Premier, what would you do to restore BC's reputation for fiscal stability?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and this is key for British Columbians. So we are one more credit rating downgrade from borrowing money on the same terms as Nigeria. That is how bad it has got for us. And as anybody knows who borrows money, the worse your credit rating is, the more it costs you to borrow money, right? So a credit rating downgrade just isn't something that happens. It means you're paying more interest, right? So British Columbians have to know every one of those downgrades costs us more and more and more in interest, which is money we don't have to spend on healthcare, money we don't have to spend on education, and more taxes we have to take from you, right? Because the government doesn't have any money. All the government has is tax dollars. So if they either take it from you today as taxpayers, or they borrow it on your behalf and you're going to have to pay it back later with interest. So we've got to make sure British Columbians know we're open for business, and then the rest of the world knows we're open for business. Honestly, the best way to do that for BC is to put a business person in the Premier's office, right? That says to the world, BC's open for business. We're a business community. I'm well known as a business person. I've been in business my whole life. I started in business for myself when I was 21. So I've never really had a day job, as they say. Always worked for myself, always signed the front side of a paycheck. But we need to get our resource sector going, right? This province was built on forestry, it was built on energy, it was built on mining, it was built on agriculture, it was built on the fisheries. We've got a Premier right now who's dismayed by that. But the reality is that'll build the province. That's what pays down the deficit. And as a Conservative, I want to give you your tax dollars back.
Well, I'm going to follow with another financial question, because you seem quite comfortable answering in this arena. The BC NDP government has budgeted $36 billion on health in 26-27. Another $10 billion is set aside for education and childcare. The entire operating budget is $98.8 billion. What specifically would you do to rein in spending?
Yeah, so we absolutely have to do this, right? The government has added 165,000 civil servants in the last 8 years, and none of us are better served, right? We're not better off. What this government, the NDP, has done is added to the administration, not to the front line. So that's true in healthcare. So we've got no more doctors and nurses on the front line, but we've got managers and senior managers and directors and senior directors and vice presidents, right? 77 vice presidents in healthcare in BC, 6 in Alberta, right? 77 versus 6. Same with the police. We've got police filling in forms and writing reports. We don't have the police out on the street, where they want to be, by the way. Doctors and nurses want to be serving patients. Police want to be on the streets protecting British Columbians. So we've got to get this administration layer out. right? We've got to get our civil servants back into the office. We've got to get them working on key priorities for British Columbians. And as taxpayers, we've got to say, what is it we want our government doing? Do we want our government selling liquor? Do we want our government selling marijuana? Because that's what they're doing today. Are we sure we want them doing that? Or would we rather smaller government that costs less and we put dollars back in each of our pockets so that we can spend that on our families and make our own lives more affordable? Because as a conservative, I believe in smaller government. I believe in lower taxes. So we've got to get to that smaller government so we can give you your taxes back.
The current government recently expanded the scope of the PST. Would you consider rolling back those expansions?
100%. So those expansions went really against what's needed in our economy right now. Housing has become unaffordable, and any young person who's trying to move out or trying to get married, trying to start a family knows housing's unaffordable. And what the government did is add PST to a number of the expenses that developers incur to build housing. So what we've done is make housing that was already unaffordable even more unaffordable. So those things have to be rolled back. I mean, the government added insult to injury, and this NDP government keeps doing this to business. They put PST on things like security. So businesses that are being constantly broken into, that are being, having shoplifters all of the time in their businesses, the police don't have the resources to come and help them. The government said, not only should you be hiring your own private security, but guess what? You're now going to pay PST on top of that. So it's another slap in the face by the NDP for small business, right? And that's what this government's done. I mean, as somebody in business in this province, I can tell you that every year under the NDP, our bottom line goes down, right? Every year there's something that brings our bottom line down. And then we wonder why there aren't jobs being created. And we wonder why we're not prosperous in our province. Well, it's this NDP government that drives every day to make it harder and harder to be in business. And I know, Wendy, I'm sure a lot of your viewers are small business people. They'll understand, like, this government is the enemy of small business.
Okay, now I'm going to go to one of the big issues in BC, and how would a government led by you deal with DRIPA legislation? And if you plan on canceling it or suspending it, what would you do to ensure that this doesn't just create more uncertainty for the business community?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so let me tell you, all 5 candidates in this have all said we're going to repeal DRIPA, right? So there's no daylight between us. Everybody's repealing DRIPA because it's the common sense right thing to do. Here's where I differ from the other candidates is after that. So when you ask the other candidates, so once you've repealed DRIPA, what are you going to do? Their answer is sort of, well, we're going to negotiate and, well, maybe we'll go to Ottawa and try and get a constitutional amendment and, Well, I'm out of ums, right? What I'm going to do is make sure we stop the voluntary transfer of land and money to Indigenous people in this province. If we're legally required to do it, we'll do it, right? If we've got a treaty that says we have to do it, we'll do it. But there will be no more voluntary transfer. Because one of the things I know as a businessman is if I'm giving you everything you want, why would you sit down and negotiate with me? You wouldn't bother. You're getting everything you want. And so that's what this government's doing, is it's giving Indigenous people everything they want all of the time with nothing in return for British Columbians. So we've got 5% of the population of BC compromising the prosperity of the rest of the province. And yet we continue to give them money and land. And I'm going to stop that. Yes, I'm going to go to Ottawa, try and get a constitutional amendment. That's out of our hands. We can lobby, we can try. But we've got to have a plan in British Columbia to deal with these issues for British Columbians. We can't rely on Ottawa to solve all our problems for us, because what if they don't?
The next question would be about education. So there is a growing debate about the direction of our public education systems. And so, where are our public schools currently falling short, you think? And what is your position on SOGI? And how do you plan to improve academic outcomes?
Yeah, so this is dear to my heart. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, right? So I have my son's in kindergarten and my daughter's in pre-kindergarten. And so they're just coming up to my son will start grade 1 in the fall. So dear to my heart. And I would tell you, I get emails every day from parents, and this is their top priority. So under this NDP government, we've lost a full grade point in 9 years compared to the national average, right? So BC's gone from being one of the best provinces in the country to the worst, educationally. And guess what we've become really good at? SOGI, right? So guess what we spent our time on? We weren't teaching math, we weren't teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, the things that we grew up learning. We've been teaching an absolutely activist agenda to children. And so I hear from parents that their 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old is being asked to pick their gender and pick who they want to be. Well, my 4-year-old wants to be a mermaid, right? My 6-year-old wanted to be a dinosaur last year. Like, are we going to let them do that? Well, we've got to a ridiculous place. SOGI needs to be repealed. It's absolute nonsense. We need schools to educate our children, and parents teach values at home, right? Because your values and my value, we may have slightly different values, right? We may have different religions, we may have different belief structures. We're going to teach those things at home under a form of government, and teachers at school are going to teach and educate our children on reading, writing, and arithmetic and the things that are important. The only thing I'll say is kids have to be safe at school, right? Kids cannot be bullied at school, and as Premier, I will protect every child at school so that they are safe every day.
Okay, as you know, the federal government controls the criminal code. It also appoints Superior Court justices. So in light of this, what can you do, if elected as the Premier, to enhance public safety?
Yep, it's priority number one for me, because British Columbians tell me every day they don't feel safe in British Columbia. And that used to be a downtown east side Vancouver thing. It's an everywhere in BC thing. It's in every small community in BC. People tell me they don't feel safe on the streets. It's got to change. So number one, police in British Columbia cannot lay criminal charges. Let me say that to you again. BC, Quebec, New Brunswick, police can't lay criminal charges. We've got to stop that. Police should be able to lay criminal charges. There should be expedited path to justice for repeat offenders. It's unacceptable that it takes 2, 3, 4 years to get people through the court system. We need to expedite that. We need to make it happen faster. We need to make sure that we are taking the side of the victim and not the side of the criminal. And people who sell drugs in our community, people who commit crime, people who hurt people who do it on a repeated basis, people who are committing extortion are going to really understand what a Premier Fulmer is going to drop the full extent of the law on them. And you know, you look at the NDP government right now and you say, well, why would a Premier not let the police press criminal charges? But David Eby, before he was Premier, I don't know if you remember, he wrote a book. And the book was called How to Sue the Police. That is the man responsible for your family's safety and mine. And he wrote a book called How to Sue the Police. Well, we're going to turn that on its head when I'm Premier, and everybody's going to feel safe in our province.
The NDP has won 2 consecutive majority governments by expanding the appeal in the suburbs. So how will you unite the factions of the Conservative movement with suburban swing voters to win in a general election?
Yeah, so one thing we absolutely have to do is defeat the NDP, right? First and foremost, my priority one, it's not about Yuri Fulmer, it's about defeating the NDP. So one of the things I did a couple of months ago was meet with Dallas Brodie from 1BC, right? 1BC is an alternate right of centre party in British Columbia, and they're polling 8 to 12%, depending on the poll. And if they get that in an election, the NDP wins, right? So if we go back in the time tunnel, 1972, we split the vote on the right, we got Dave Barrett and the NDP. 91 and 96, we split the vote on the right, we got Mike Harcourt and Glenn Clark and the NDP in the worst decade in British Columbian history. 2017, we split the vote on the right in a couple of ridings. Christy Clark lost. We got John Horgan and the NDP. 2024, we had a bunch of independents split the vote on the right, and we got David Eby and the NDP in the 2 worst years in British Columbian recorded history. So we can't let that happen. So I did a deal with Dallas Brodie. We'll run Conservatives in 88 ridings in the province, unopposed by 1BC. And in 5 ridings in the province, 1BC will field 5 candidates, and we won't run against them. And we'll have a supply and confidence agreement between us. It is the guarantee that Conservative values will prevail and we will win the next election. And I'm the only candidate that's done this. And I'm the only candidate that Dallas Brodie will do this with.
Okay, how would you strike a balance between making residents feel safe in their communities while simultaneously providing meaningful support for those struggling with mental health and addiction and who genuinely need help?
So we need mandatory compassionate care. And let me tell you why and why I believe this profoundly and deeply. So I'm guided by my faith. Doesn't matter whether people have faith or don't have faith. This is true for all of us. But my God tells me to take care of my neighbor. And that doesn't just mean the person who lives next door to me, who lives like I do. That means everybody in the province. And whether you're religious or not religious, if you walk by somebody lying in a gutter, addicted to drugs, suffering from mental health issues, your response should not be, well, I'm sure it's their civil right to lie in the gutter. Your response should be, let me pick my brother or sister up, put them over my shoulder and carry them to help. Right? That's what my God tells me to do. That's what I would tell any British Columbian to do. And if that was honestly my brother or sister and they said to me, Yuri, I don't want help, let me go, I'd say, too bad. You're coming to get help now. Right? And I will take you against your will to go and get help, because that's what I do for my brother or sister. And if I do it for my brother or sister, why wouldn't I do it for my neighbor? So I don't think there's a balance to be struck here at all. I think a caring community that looks after the most vulnerable people in the community, whether they're guided by their God or guided by their values, takes care of everybody, and that's what we're going to do. We need to get back to a world where people check in on their neighbors, where when neighbors are sick, people take a casserole next door. And I know farmers know this because they help their neighbors take off their crops. That's the kind of British Columbia I want to live in.
The last question, how has your specific background prepared you for the unique pressure of the Premier's office? And why does your experience make you the best choice for the specific moment in BC history?
Yeah, so here's what I mean, obviously I've been in business for myself for a long time. I understand how business works. I understand what it takes to have employees commit their livelihood to you, right? People trust your leadership with their paycheck and with their family's livelihood. So I've experienced that. As a community volunteer, I've helped community build itself. I lead a $6.5 billion global charity called United Way. We're in 34 countries in the world. We have 1 million volunteers globally, and we help community lift itself up. And as Premier, that's what I want to do. I want to help communities lift themselves up so that they can be bigger, stronger, more prosperous, more caring, more nurturing. So I want to bring that to it. And if I had one legacy, and if somebody said, Yuri, at the end of your time as Premier, what do you want to be remembered for? I want to be remembered for bringing heart, kindness, and care into the Premier's office. Because I want British Columbians to feel always that they're looked after by their Premier and government.
Thank you very much. That concludes our question and answer session, Yuri, and thank you for giving our viewers an understanding of where you stand on some important issues. Now I'll ask for a 30-second closing statement. And what's your final message to the Wendy Yuan Unfiltered audience?
Well, I appreciate this opportunity. Anytime I can speak directly to voters and British Columbians, it's an honor and a privilege. I'm asking British Columbians to give me the best job in the province. Right? So you work hard for that. And, I've been to all 93 ridings in the province. I've met literally thousands of British Columbians, good, hard-working folks who want to make their communities better and stronger, more resilient, more vibrant. And I would tell you that my role here is not to dictate terms. I don't have a top-down leadership style. My style is to help British Columbia thrive. And so I want to be almost invisible in that process. And I want British Columbians to, at the end of my time as Premier, look back and say, wow, I don't know what happened in those years, but man, I'm better off now than I was. I've got health care that I didn't know I had before. My kids are getting well educated. I feel safe all the time. I've got a great family supporting job so that, mom and dad don't both have to go to work. We own our own home and we're secure in it each and every day. That's what I want British Columbians to feel. I don't want all of us to feel that. And if they know I was part of that, it doesn't matter to me. I just want British Columbians to be better off.
Thank you so much for participating in our BC Conservative Leadership Forum, Yuri. Wendy, do you have any closing comments?
I just wanted to close by, again, reminding all registered and verified party members to cast their votes online from May 23rd to May 29th. Your vote matters. The results will be announced at the Leadership Convention on May 30th. So thank you, Yuri, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on our show. And I wish you the very best of the luck for the campaign.
Thank you. God bless. Thank you.
And if you like what you see on Wendy Yuan Unfiltered, subscribe to the podcast and tell your friends. You can also follow this podcast on social media channels listed below. I hope you can join us for our next episode. Until then, take care.